Hello, everybody. Welcome back to ELF Live Monday morning show. I am your co-host, Nick Alfieri, back from the United States of America. I'm excited. I'm thrilled. I'm a little bit jet lagged, but I'm lucky to be here this morning with two of the best European football analysts in the game, Matt Bressington and Alex Malchow. What is up, boys?
Oh, an introduction. I'm doing good. It was a mental week. Lots of upsets and things going on. High scoring. Good week. Good week.
Absolutely. And Alex, you're back. What's up?
I'm back. I missed you guys. I missed talking ELF ball with my boys here. What a weekend of football in Europe. Some high-scoring games, some nail-biters. Can't wait to get into it.
Yes, and we are going to do just that. So we're going to get into the games, walk through each of the games from this past week 8, and then we're going to take a look at the standings. Maybe some controversial opinions arise, and then we're going to get into MVP talk and talk about our nominees who could be the MVP candidates for this week. And as some people will be joining us here in the chat, probably in a couple of minutes, you guys can join in on that conversation as well. So without further ado, let us get into week 8 of the European League of Football. Taking a look there at that slate of games. Like you guys said, we have some interesting ones, and we'll start off with what we called the Battle of the Beatons as of last week. The Enthroners who came into this 0-6 and the Prague Lions who came into this 0-7. Somebody had to win this game. Let's get into this one and talk about it. Start off with you, Matt. Give me a little bit of your thoughts on this one.
I like battle the beaten. Like you said, horrible way to put it at the start. 2 0 whatever teams, 0-6, 0-7. But the Enthroners looked like by far the better team coming out of this. Like, it was kind of close for a little bit. It looked like it was kind of working, and Enthroners just pulled away. Jack Mangle looked excellent. He had 373 yards and 3 touchdowns in the day. He looked pretty flawless. Run game was getting there for sure. Robitaille, as we've said about him getting involved, he was involved 4 times for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. Big game for him. Glad to see he's actually finally returned. Defensively, that was a big thing. Perkins had 0 time behind the offensive line. It's still an issue. It's been an issue for the whole season. And the Enthroners made it very clear they wanted to go for a heavy defensive end set with the Americans and with the Europeans they brought in. That seems to have paid off against Prague because, oh my goodness, Perkins was getting annihilated. Every second he would have someone in his face. Impossible to really play to a high level when you've got nothing going. Even the run game, Adam, who we know is a good player, we've seen how good he is as a running back. He only got 21 yards on 4 carries. They couldn't run the ball because the offensive line was so poor. And Perkins didn't have much to really go off of. It could have been more competitive if Prague had a better offensive line, but they didn't. The Enthroners come in easy, very comfortable. They scored at 14 in 2 of the quarters, and they kind of walked to a 38-point score, well above average for that season.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a kind of, in my opinion, a bit of a surprise just how lopsided it was. And guys in the chat, some of you guys are having some trouble in the chat, we're starting to see your messages now. So just keep typing away in there. We'll get that figured out. Alex, what are your thoughts on this matchup? Were you surprised at how lopsided this was?
I was expecting a closer game, especially with the game being in Prague. But there was a certain point where the Enthroners had some momentum, and I thought they're going to go deep to Robitaille here, the big play threat receiver. And they hit him on a wheel route, and I think that broke the game open there. Like Matt mentioned, their defense played really well. They had 6 sacks on the day and an interception, absolutely swarming David Perkins. And Mangle and Robitaille, I don't know, their connection was lost for a couple weeks. It has clearly been found again. These guys hooking up on the big play like we see here. And we have 24-6, and that was all she wrote after that.
Absolutely. And we touched on it last week on Thursday when we talked about our predictions for this one. I leaned heavy towards the Enthroners, and I'm glad I did. And I think that the big difference in this game was quarterback play. Obviously, with Jack Mangle going for 373 yards through the air, no picks, and Perkins only 194 yards. And that's just what's going to happen when you have some more consistency at quarterback at the position. I mean, the Enthroners have had their struggles, but they've stuck with their guy throughout the entire season. And now they've had, 7 games? There's been some ups and downs, but the consistency there, I think, played a big role in the lopsided nature of this game, with the Prague Lions just have such inconsistency at quarterback. And we saw that with the results here today. And you said it, Alex, with that, the connection that Mangle and Robitaille had. I feel like we finally got to see a little bit of what Nathaniel Robitaille is capable of, kind of the stuff we saw with Robitaille last year and previously. He's been out there in Hungary. It hasn't been a super highlight season for the Enthroners, so he hasn't really been in the conversation when we're talking about elite wide receivers this year. But it was cool to see him, get involved in that way. And then just looking, the Enthroners were great on third down as well. They were 9 for 13. And so kind of a lot of positives for the Enthroners, a good step forward here. My question to you guys would be, we'll start with you, Matt. Next week, the Enthroners are going to play the Milano Seamen. When they played previously, it was a reasonably close game. Milano has had a little bit of success. They've got 3 wins now. Do you think that the Enthroners have taken enough steps in the right direction to beat the Milano Seamen coming up this weekend?
Geez, rhyme voice, as you say. I think yes, because they've had a lot of improvements to their roster. Like, we've seen people make changes and stuff, as you mentioned, the quarterback, but Mangle's been great. 9 touchdowns, 2 picks in the season is way above expectations that I had coming in, because as we remember, like, the big thing coming in this year was like he had more interceptions than touchdowns in college. But then they've adjusted, they built around him, and developed a quarterback, which is something we've talked about forever. It's just developing quarterbacks in ELF. They brought in Leonardo and Stephacolis and Oliver Triboulet, and they played great at tight end and receiver, respectively. They've built around the team, whereas Milan have had kind of a similar thing, where they've had Zach Brockhurst, and they've kept him in for the year, and they've kind of not really given him enough support. They haven't switched out any receivers. They haven't got any more receiving help or offensive line help or something. So I'm actually still favoring the Enthroners to take that win against the Milano Seamen.
There we go. Interesting. And then in the chat, Marcus says, finally a win for Hungary. We're making progress in my household, boys. I believe we needed the Enthroners to win for Marcus's wife to approve his ELF obsession. So we're taking steps in the right direction for our boys in the chat. This one ends up at 38-6. The Enthroners with the beatdown of the Prague Lions out there in the East, picking up their first win of the season. All right, moving on. We were out east. Now we're moving back west to a very, very interesting, exciting game. I was actually on the call for this game, so I got to watch it in great detail. Cologne versus Frankfurt. And guys in the chat, feel free to chime in your thoughts on these games as well. Alex, we'll start with you this time. Give us a little bit of your thoughts on this exciting Western Conference matchup.
Yeah, another exciting kind of instant classic in the Western Conference. Nick, you got to call a great game. Cologne came out swinging in Frankfurt, running the ball down their throats on what's supposed to be a physical, fast, athletic defense, right? Cologne showed up. Both of their running backs, Emil Fuchs and Gerald Ammon, played really well. And Isaiah Weed, his stats aren't amazing, but when it was third down, he would put his head down and convert the chains. I mean, I think he made enough plays to win. And I think star of this game was on defense for Cologne with Bijan Harris. Had a fumble recovery touchdown, had an amazing interception. But what the stats don't show is the job he did against Markel Castle, the best receiver in the ELF. Held him to only 4 catches, 45 yards. A lot of receivers, they're happy with that day. Markel Castle is certainly not. So Bijan Harris, tipped cap to him and Cologne as a whole. Great win for Centurions, who've been knocking on the door. They've been in some games. I was happy for him to break through like this.
You're right. They have been in some games. We've been saying that, and it's just a matter of time before they're able to kind of tip the scales a little bit and pull away with a win. Matt, what are your thoughts on this one?
Like you said, Weed was so good, and it's kind of an instance where the tape is needed to be watched rather than just looking at the stats. Right. Because you're seeing sometimes in the comment section with the legalizer, that was Weed's MVP slogan for the week during the stream. So he was playing that well that we would seriously considering him to be like a low key MVP of the week just due to the performance that they put on. They are a heavy run team. We talked about it before. Like, if the pass ain't working, just run the ball down people's throats. And the Galaxy have had issues with the run. We saw Glenn go for Glenn numbers, which is in retrospective, Glenn had an average game going for like 200 yards against them. But like we've seen that they're susceptible to the run. And I think they continued to do that. Like you said, great on third down. They came up clutch. Bijan with that pick. They didn't like the bend don't break defense when it came to the red zone. Galaxy still struggling in the red zone. This maybe not a Luke thing. Maybe it was just a Galaxy thing with the red zone offense. Matthew McKay had a very tough debut game to come in and have to lead a comeback and then had to have a last-second drive, which didn't come to anything in the end. He played fine. He was a lot more mobile than I was expecting him to be. I did not expect them to be running with him as much. Like combine-wise, and it's different, combine and football speed, but I didn't have him as a dual threat running back, quarterback rather, and they ran with 92 yards with him. So I'm not sure. Maybe they're still trying to figure out what he's at because he had more carries than Sandro, which is odd.
Right.
Sandro had one pull back as well, which is unfortunate. That could have been a pretty defining moment, but that got called back. Castle, like you said, Bijan was so good against Castle. Kaya as well was solid, but the fumble by Straumann and also Bijan was involved with that too. Like, he was a phenomenal player. Defensively, Galaxy were around, but they just gave up too many of these third down plays, like you said, Alex. Those big runs, those draws, those scrambles away. They couldn't bring down Weed, and that was ultimately what led them to losing this game. And it was a big surprise game that they lost. No one thought they would have lost this, especially told us at the start of the year, like the Centurions would beat the Galaxy in Frankfurt. Like, that's incredible. What instant classic, and it was an amazing game to watch and experience. Like at the time, it was amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys both touched on it. Bijan Harris, just absolutely impressive. He's the UNLV product, and it was unfortunate. There was a couple, his two big plays. So he had the forced fumble and then scooped and scored it. On the call there, we had some technical difficulties, so my broadcast didn't go through on there, but I was just screaming, going crazy on this. And then he had the interception later in the game while covering Malchow Castle, just like you said, Alex, the best, or if not one of the best wide receivers in the league. Castle really a bit quieter without playing with Luke. Him and Matthew McKay don't really have that connection just yet. McKay's favorite receiver seemed to be Kaya, who went for over 100 yards, but Malchow Castle just held to only 45 yards when he'd previously been over 100 yards, close to 200 yards in a couple games as well. So that was a factor. And then we got to give a shout out on the Frankfurt defense side, and we will later in the MVP talk more, but Dren Dahl had 18 tackles and an interception. Just ridiculous. These are AJ Wentland numbers. You know, we don't get near 20 tackles that often. So we got to give that a little bit of shout out. See what you fellas in the chat have to say. Thomas Lustig. Oh, sorry. That was from the last game. Thomas Lustig said Cologne finally showing their potential. They've got a good roster, but also have such a tough conference. Past scores make a worse impression than the Centurions deserve. I think we all kind of touched on it, guys. The Centurions, they've had some promise this year. They have not benefited from having an easy roster or an easy schedule like some other teams. They're having to play juggernauts there in the Western Conference. And to see them get a win against Frankfurt like this on the road, it was very, very impressive. My question, we only got a little bit of time left on this game before we move on. Is Matthew McKay the guy for Frankfurt? We'll start with you, Alex.
I was pretty impressed as a whole. I think he was thrown into a tough situation, like this being Luke's team coming in late in the week. And yeah, you'd love to see him like win the game there with 2 minutes left, right? But it didn't go his way, but he showed the traits that he has the ability to be their guy moving forward, at least until Luke is healthy. So yeah, overall, I leave the game feeling good about McKay.
Yeah. Matt?
I think so too. I agree. I think he has the potential, and he was just, he's not in the direct scheme fit yet. And I think they'll adjust and make moves and see, maybe use him more as a pocket passer rather than a rusher. I think that'll be good for them.
Yeah. So we will see how the rest of the season develops for the Frankfurt Galaxy with their new quarterback, Matthew McKay. You guys touched on it. He showed that ability of producing offense, just unable to come back for the win. And kudos to the Cologne Centurions for the big win. All right, moving on to another game that I think people were a little bit surprised by the final score. An interconference matchup between the Helvetic Mercenaries and the Vienna Vikings. Let me just start by saying it is a little bit unfortunate that the Helvetic Mercenaries drew the Vienna Vikings for their interconference opponent. You know, Munich drew Prague. It might have made more sense if Mercenaries drew Prague for their Eastern Conference opponent and Munich had Vienna. But hey, that's all in the scheduling. Mercenaries had to go out and play the Vienna Vikings. Interesting game. Starting with you this time, Matt. What are your thoughts on this interconference matchup?
This was a weird game. I did not expect this to be anywhere near as close. Checked up on the score at some point, and it was like 28-3. I think at one point, that's usual Vikings. They've got a very good team, and the Mercs have got well-documented issues. And then they just started scoring points, and it was coming out in bursts. Aiken had a great game. You know, kind of one where you got to look at the stats. He had 2 picks, and they weren't great, but he also ran for 85 yards and a touchdown and had 396 in the air. Milan Spiller is absolutely in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. Like, people were talking about Noah Torre as if he's got it, which isn't necessarily true. He had only 24 yards in this game, whereas Spiller had 202 touchdowns. He was incredible. I really didn't expect this to be anywhere as close as it was. 40 points for a team that's previously really struggled to score. They struggled to score against Milan. They struggled to score against Barca. Like, they weren't scoring anywhere near this, and then they come and do a 40 bomb on one of the best defenses in the league. It was very, very, very strange to watch. Bury played well. The defense in general, though, was kind of a reverse day. In this one and a couple of other games that we'll get to later. Like, great defense gave up 49. Bad offense put up 40.
Right.
Very backwards. I think Vikings maybe got a little bit of a reality check. They got a bit too comfortable when they were up there by that many points, and they were up 28-3, and they kind of thought, let's take our foot off the gas a little bit. We don't really need to try as much. This is the Mercenaries. We're at home. We'll be fine. And then 22 points in the fourth quarter by the Mercs is probably more than they've scored in the last several quarters, combined, which is just kind of mental. Reese Horn, though, he was a spectacular again. Continues to be the best receiver in the league in terms of stats. Swancore as well. That Vienna defense, you look at the stats and they played quite well, but they gave up 40. Ken Hike had a revenge game. Like, there was so many storylines in this whole game that we could touch on, but we've only got a limited time. I don't want to take up all of it. I'll give you guys the rest.
I mean, there's a lot that we can talk. Alex, you've been a big proponent of the Vikings, specifically of Ben Holmes, aka Ben VP. You went out to Vienna, touched down in Austria, and went to a game a couple of weeks ago. What are your thoughts on this? What I think is fair to describe it, kind of a weird game.
It was a weird game. It felt like if you're playing Madden or something and you put it on rookie mode and you just want to score 100 points. That's what this game felt like. You know, there was a touchdown every few minutes. But yeah, as a Viking supporter, I was a little nervous towards the end. You know, it was never crazy in doubt, but you started sitting up in your chair, if you might. But obviously, Ben Holmes, he played still a pretty good game, 4 touchdowns, nearly 300 yards. But defensively, I think the Vikings have some work to do moving forward. They are still 8-0, but giving up 40 points to the Mercenaries, if you said that a month ago, I wouldn't believe you,
Yeah, absolutely. And what is it? Because people in the chat here, David Wallen says, very surprising that the Helvetic Mercenaries made up like that. My first thought was that the Vienna Vikings put in their backups when they were up 28-3, but that was not really the case. And that was actually what I thought as well. I know there's a couple Vikings defenders not playing. I think Ben Straight wasn't playing, but why do you guys think that the Vienna Vikings, which has been one of the best defenses in this league week in and week out, had such an off day?
I think it's probably the big plays. Like, they had 8 sacks. Like, they got to Aiken a lot, and his offensive line is arguably just as bad as Prague's offensive line. So they weren't giving him any time. He was getting ravaged. But like, it was those big plays over the top. Milan Spiller got a couple of them, and they had Chavaro go for a long touchdown. He's a DB playing receiver, which is itself a different conversation. But even he got a long touchdown. It was a big explosive plays. They've had a lot of DB turnover at the same time with both Xavier Edwards and Hunter Nichols getting injured. They got Hike in, and they got Morales in, which is, you coming in a couple weeks practice. It's probably going to take a minute. Hike was great, and the defense overall was solid, but then they gave up these massive plays. Kind of seems like they got a little bit lackadaisical and didn't cover deep as much as they should have, and then they just gave up a lot of burst plays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I feel like I noticed. I feel like there was a few blown coverages, with the Vikings secondary, and that just led to those big, massive plays that we haven't really seen the Vikings give up so far this year. In the chat, Alex, Jamal has said Ake VP. Kind of a stretch. Okay, Jamal, a little bit of a stretch. That doesn't really rhyme with the MVP, such as Ben VP or Hen VP. I get where you're going, Jamal. I get where you're going. Is this a fair campaign slogan for Carlton Aiken's performance this week?
I think you have to give Carlton Aiken some flowers. I mean, he's been the heart of this team. Like, watching him play for the Mercs week in and week out is inspiring. Like, I want to be a better person watching Carl Aiken play football for the Mercs. He plays his heart out there, and he got him a win a couple weeks ago. Now this is this is kind of a moral victory for the Mercs. Let's be honest. They hung with a really good team. Like, it's a win for the Mercenaries fans, and it's a win for Carlton Aiken for sure this week.
Carlton Aiken is making us all be better people, live more inspired lives, both on and off the field, fighting through all of that adversity off the field and getting this team to keep moving in the right direction. All right, Jamal, you got us. Ake VP is a legitimate campaign slogan. This one ends a shootout, 49-40. The Vikings do, though, despite the struggles on defense, remain undefeated. That's a good one. Welcome to everybody. We're getting a few more people here in the chat. Welcome. And we will be moving on to the Spanish Derby, El Clasico. Obviously, a lot of drama off the field for the Barcelona Dragons. We talked about it in detail at the last show. You can go back and watch the relive on that. We don't have to get all into all of that again. But this one, very expectedly so, was quite one-sided. I think Alex, who's first this time? Is it Alex or is it Matt?
I can start off.
Alex, you start off.
Yeah.
I'm losing my brain cells.
Shout out to the Dragons for showing up and playing some football. They allowed any fan to come in for free, which was a nice gesture after last week's game. Seemed like the fans there were having a great time. I saw, despite Madrid really, dominating them on the field, there was a clip I saw of the new coach, Catalayud, I believe is how you say his name, threw a challenge flag, and as he threw it, the crowd erupted to cheer. So, it was a good day for Spanish football nonetheless, but not so much on the field for the Dragons as they got goose-egged and blown out in this one. It went kind of how we all expected it to go. Madrid, maybe a good warm-up for them this week, as they can kind of cruise by the Dragons and get ready for another gauntlet of games in the Western Conference.
Yep, there we go. Matt, what are your thoughts on this situation, this one?
Exactly the same. I'm super happy the Dragons came out on the field. Shout out to all of those players that actually actively took the field for their team. I think that shows a lot of heart, a lot of Carlton Aiken makes you want to be a better man. The Dragons also, the players that played make you want to be a better man. They were definitely quite inspiring to see them actually come out and play regardless of everything that goes on. Of course, like you said, big win for Madrid. They come out with an important win for the Western Conference as it shapes up. They got a couple of teams breathing down their neck to trying to go for those seeds, and for them to kind of be able to warm up. Their running game looked great. They got 108 yards rushing. Obi limited to only 11 carries, which I think is good just to keep him fresh for the next games. Duncan played well. Threw a pick, but played well overall. Patterson, 2 touchdowns for himself. It was as expected that they would get this win, but more so that we're just happy we got to see the Dragons on the field again rather than never again, because that would have been quite heartbreaking to see a team with that amount of history just fade out into nothing. But I'm glad we actually got to see them play, and Madrid did what we expected them to do. So it was quite a quiet game. Didn't really expect too much, and overall it's what we thought would happen.
Yep, absolutely. And we got to give a shout out to the man, Glenn Tunga. Glenn VP is in the chat. Stick around, Glenn. We're going to be saying your name a little bit later in the show. You had another comically great game. We'll be talking about that. All right, here, guys, I have a little bit of I don't know if this is a controversial opinion. It might be. For me, Madrid might be on fraud alert, okay?
Ooh.
Hear me out. I think, and I said this from the beginning, that we really overreacted with their first win against the Rhein Fire. That sent ripples across the league. We all freaked out. The first Rhein Fire loss in however long. I stand by the fact that I think the Madrid played above their potential in that game. They were playing emotional football. They had just lost Chris Helbig. They were getting that win for their quarterback. And they, in the Rhein Fire that same week, were playing very, very flat. The Rhein Fire didn't show up. They couldn't get going. So it was a combination of those two things. To me, that is the only impressive win that the Madrid Bravos have so far. If I look at the rest of their schedule, like I said, the Fire win is the only impressive one. I stand by that. They were back and forth with Cologne. I broadcast that game. They beat them by 11, but it was actually even closer than the score shows. They beat Frankfurt, who had a backup German quarterback playing half the game, and then an injured Luke Zaraka playing half the game. And this Frankfurt team, as the season goes on, is proven to not be very elite. So that win doesn't really age as well as we thought it was. And I just don't know if I am believing all the Bravos hype that they are an elite team. They're a good team. They're a very good team. Don't get me wrong. But we're going to see this week against Paris how real they really are. And I could look like an idiot, but this is just my instinct right now. I think I'm only impressed with one of their wins. Before we move on to the next game, guys, tell me I'm crazy. What do we think?
A little bit. A little bit. They do still have a good defense. Their Russian defense isn't great, but they do have a good passing defense. Jane Embry, I think he might have got a little bit banged up in the last game.
Okay.
They do still have a good passing defense. They've got the number one for points allowed on defense. I know they're playing some dud teams, and like you explained, some fortunate circumstances in regard to their matchmaking. They have a decent offense. Duncan's a good quarterback. We got Dwayne Obi, who's a great running back. I'm not sure if they're on fraud watch, but I think the Paris game will be extremely, extremely revealing, one way or the other. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be close. I think one of them is going to win. I think it's going to be Paris win, but I'm not sure. I think it could be quite revealing.
Okay. Alex,
broad watch is a bit harsh, Nick. I think these guys are, a similar level maybe to the Raiders. In my book, they have a really talented roster of imports, and the Spanish guys, they keep surprising us. We keep underestimating the Spanish talent. They keep surprising us week after week. So, yeah, we'll put that to the test in Paris.
We will put that to the test. Sometimes you gotta just speak your mind. We'll see how dumb I look next Monday. And if I look dumb, I'll take it. But we'll see. We'll see about that. Big game for them this weekend. Obviously, the big routing of the Barcelona Dragons. That one ends 54-0. And we will be moving on to a very interesting game. Another interesting one. And this one had a bit of a paradox in it. The Berlin Thunder versus the Paris Musketeers. And real quickly, we'll just say we talked about the Berlin Thunder being a great first half team and then not showing up in the second half of all of their games this year. And they kind of did the opposite this week. They were non-existent in the first half, and then they really showed up in the second half. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Matt, you'll go first on this one. Give us your thoughts on this interconference matchup.
They traded their first half skill for their second half skill, and then they forgot about the first half skill. It's a weird one. Like we said with the Mercs, weird backwards day. This was one of those weird backwards days. They went 28 points down in the first half, which was in itself pretty incomprehensible. And then they go and put 27 points up in the second half and make it a really, really close game. And Niddy actually made a comeback. Sullivan looked great. The running game was kind of there for a bit. Like it was around. Jackson still incredible, but that first half defense was getting torched. Like they were getting torched. We talked about their run D was not as good as some of the other contemporaries in this league, and that kind of showed. But like, what happened? I don't get it. Like all of my years of watching football, I don't get how a team can be so bad in one half and then look like a legit championship contender like a few minutes later, like 20 minutes later. What happened in that locker room to make them come out that good? Edwards on fine form again. He got 3 touchdowns in the air. And that's the big thing. They could not stop Edwards on the ground. Like, he was running everywhere. They couldn't bring him down. If they just completed a few of those pressures into sacks, it would have been a different story. But he got 140 on the ground just on his own, and some really key third downs down the stretch. So that third and 16 he somehow got.
Yes.
Incredible. I think Tekadam deserves a lot of praise. That he's listed as a quarterback, and Jamal, shout out to him as a quarterback in fantasy football. But he's a receiver, and he got 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, as an athlete position player, there he is. You can see him on the highlights. Remy Bertolone, one of the more underrated receivers in this league. He has the same kind of production as Yank Meyer, but people don't talk about him in the same regard. But he's an excellent receiver. Dawson Dales was Dawson Dales. He was everywhere. That 4.2 speed. Kalani was great. The defensive line is phenomenal. Like, they had a great game in the first half, and it was odd because they still played well in the second, but then they gave up all these points. This game blew my mind. I don't know what to think about it. I have so many mixed emotions about what happened, but yeah, it was a weird one.
If ELF football just were 2-quarter games, Berlin would be the best team on this damn continent. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Well said, Nick. Yeah, this felt like almost like a 28-3, Super Bowl moment in this one with Berlin coming back. For me, I was writing the recap on this game for the ELF side and already had the title and everything written. Paris dominates Berlin. I had to basically rewrite half of it. So, Berlin really showed up second half. Johnny Schmook, he must have gave a hell of a halftime speech to his boys there. But yeah, I was excited. Once they got a few big plays, Aaron Jackson kind of woke up the team, and we'll see later. They pulled off the best quarterback sneak I've ever seen in the ELF. That's for sure. Or as our guy Joey Lindstrom, the announcer here, he called it the Gator roll. We'll take a look at it in a few minutes on the highlights here. But yeah, I really like what Paris has done. They look great, by the way. Their new uniforms. For this game, very clean, kind of Notre Dame vibes for me, maybe right. Navy, I don't know. Look good. Zach Edwards, like you said, Matt played really well. Nick, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm just absolutely baffled. Like, I think probably everyone who watches or follows our league, I mean, we've just harped on Berlin for being able to be great in the first half and being able to lead against elite teams in the first half and all the way up until the fourth quarter, and then unable to finish, unable to keep their foot on the gas. And they did the exact opposite this week. It was baffling. I took a picture. I was watching on the ELF Game Pass this game, and I took a picture at halftime. Match statistics. Score was obviously 28-0. And here are the difference in stats. Paris, in the first half, had 115 rushing yards. Berlin, 2. Paris had 136 passing yards. Berlin, 9. That comes out to 251 yards of offense to 11 yards of offense. It might as well have been 0. It's baffling. I don't understand it. Maybe, sometimes teams don't travel well and it takes them a little bit of time to get going. I've seen this a couple times. I saw this with the Stuttgart Surge when they had the big bus ride out to Ravsla, and it took them a while to get going. But I don't know. Is that the case? Is that what happened here? I'm just absolutely baffled. And here we see on the highlight the Gator roll. He is coming. That was incredible. Look at that.
Outstanding.
Kyle Kitchens was in there giving a little tush push. But ultimately those are my thoughts on this game is what the hell? I mean, it's like, and did Paris let up? Did Paris feel super comfortable? I mean, they were up 35-0. A lot of times this is where you see guys or teams pulling their starters. But this game leaves me confused and also excited for the fact that almost anything can happen in this league week by week. And this one ends up 35-27 for the Paris Musketeers. And Paris Musketeers, they've got a big one. We just touched on it next week against the Madrid Bravos. But yeah, also everyone in the chat agrees. And Alex, you touched on it. Those Paris jerseys are awesome.
So clean. My favorite ones of the whole year.
Yeah, those are just so sick. Paris, what they do on the field is obviously great. They're have only one loss, but what they do off the field is also incredible. A lot of good branding stuff, a lot of good media stuff. I'm a big fan of that franchise, and they move on with the win. Now, to the north of Germany, no, I'm wrong. I'm out of order. Sorry, pardon me. We're going to the interesting Central Conference matchup between the Stuttgart Surge and the Raiders T-Roll. I was supposed to be at this game, but I had a travel nightmare and couldn't end up driving all the way down there, so I had to watch it on the Game Pass. This was a back and forth game. Very, very interesting. Start with you, Alex. What are your thoughts on this Central Conference showdown?
Yeah, really exciting game. Really down to the wire. I thought the Raiders, they played pretty well, and then they just couldn't overcome some key mistakes in the fourth quarter. Stuttgart Surge defense, they came up clutch again later in this game when they needed to. But overall, I think the Raiders have proven that it's tough to win in Innsbruck. They have a great crowd behind them, and they're always going to make it tough on the visitors. And we don't know what the Raiders are. That they played well against maybe the best team in the ELF in this one. So we'll see how that helps them moving forward. If they can hold on to that second spot in the Central Conference and get into the playoffs, hopefully they can take this game and use it moving forward. And on the other side, the Surge remain undefeated, overcame some mistakes of their own, and keep the train rolling.
Absolutely. And we touched on it a couple shows ago. That second spot, I don't want to take anything for granted and assume things, but it looks like the Surge will end up with the first spot in Central. That second seed in the Central Conference is going to come down to the Raiders and the Ravens. And we touched on a couple weeks ago, the Ravens have a much easier second half of the season schedule than the Raiders. So they're going to have to scratch and claw to end up there at number 2. Matt, what are your thoughts on this one?
This was a stress-inducing game, man. Like, this raised my heart level and years of my life watching this in the live. But yeah, it was really odd. It was another really backwards game. But we've talked about it all year. The Raiders played down to bad teams and played up to good teams, and they did it again. They did it again. This was also a battle of best rushing offense versus best rushing defense. It seems to me like the Russian defense won. I know Bonatti got 3 Russian touchdowns, but he also was only held to 28 yards, which is pretty low for any kind of running back. But Perry went for 96. But Perry was, again, not great. 3 interceptions, a pick 6 down the stretch. Fettig got a pick, and so did Wetzelberger, who's making a bit of a name for himself as a clutch player, because he also got a clutch play with Voshtav a couple weeks back. They are a weird team, the Surge. Both of these are weird teams. Riley, maybe a little bit shaking off a bit of rust. He's played halves only pretty exclusively for the last couple of weeks. Now, something we bought was, are they going to be fresh when it comes to actually playing a full 60 minutes of a game rather than 30 minutes of a game? Because they've been cakewalking an easy schedule. They play against a real team, and they were held a little bit. Defensively, they were sound, and they got those turnovers, but offensively, it took them a while to get the wheels moving. The Raiders, though, man, I know some people complained about the refs for this one, which I didn't really personally see the refs having much of an issue, but they didn't get to Hennessy enough for any real pressure, and he was able to just do what he does and sit behind the pocket and pick him apart for a while. The running game for the Surge was doing well as well against his defense. It was just the Raiders had a chance down the stretch to make something happen, and they kind of just fell short, as they've done. It was the second time we've seen them in one of these long drives that they did against Munich with Perry's first game. It kind of had shade to that first game when he was driving down the field kind of slowly. Pick. It was just kind of a killer. Interested to see how they move forward with this one, because they've lost to the big teams and they've beaten some of the middle teams. They're in the upper mid kind of section, as we talked about, and they're really struggling to break out against one of these big teams, because they were close and they were winning this game, and they had that field goal that they got called back, and they had an opportunity to go for a touchdown, and then they just stuffed it. And they didn't have anything. They're on a half yard away, and they just pulled that ball up. Perry's 6'2". Perry's a big guy. Sneak that. Just put the ball over the line, and he would have had a touchdown. It could have been a very different game. But the flags and maybe some undiscipline, because they had 2 false starts in a row that brought them back from that. Then they ended up kicking a field goal and wasted multiple minutes, which then would have been very clutch for them down in the later half. And that, for me, is the point they lost this game, was having the field goal took back, multiple minutes gone, and they still settle with a field goal, and they're not able to punch it in from less than a yard away. That was ultimately what lost them this game, not the ending pick, although that also did. But
Yeah.
that was the one that really settled it for me. Is right, the Surge have got this in the bag.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you touched on some people complaining about the officiating. It was 9 penalties to 9 penalties, so can't get much more even than that. I thought it was really interesting. You guys both said it. The Raiders like had a chance to win this game. I mean, they had more first downs, kind of substantially more, 25 to the Surge's 14. They were more efficient on third down. They kind of dominated time of possession, had more total yards, but the Surge found a way to win. And, I talk about the Surge a lot, but I do think that is a sign of a very good team. It wasn't the Surge's best game, but they were still able to come away with a win against a very solid to good team. A couple really standout interceptions on the defensive side for the Surge. Mitch Fettig had an amazing one where he jumped the route, picked off N'Kosi Perry, and then Raheem Wilson, the old timer, who has rejoined Coach Jordan Newman and company. He had a pick 6 where he walked in pretty easily. N'Kosi Perry, yeah, he had 3 picks. I think only one of them was really bad, and it was the pick 6. That was kind of a bad decision. But the one at the end, he's just trying to make something happen, and the other one was just a great defensive play. So those 3 picks I don't think is as damning as it might look on the stat sheet, because he did distribute the ball well. He threw the ball, I think, at 8 receivers, make catches. Philip Hahn, who has been quiet in previous games and battled injury, it was nice to see him get involved and show what he can do. He's a very good European wide receiver. But yeah, this one, the Surge are able to come away with the road win. Back half of the season going to be very, very interesting for the Raiders. They have a bit of an uphill battle as they face the Ravens for that number 2 seed. So they'll be very interesting. The rematch against the Surge later this year, it'll be in Stuttgart, and then they're also going to be playing the Ravens again. So I look to those 2 games to see what the Raiders are made of. But a little bit of things impressed me from the Raiders. A little bit of things disappointed me. And ultimately, Stuttgart Surge just a little bit too deep. And they move on to remain undefeated. All right. The last game of our day, Rhein Fire versus our director / producer, hometown team, Maxie. He's a Hamburg Sea Devil at heart. This one was a bit one-sided. Glenn, feel free to chime in and give us your first-person perspective on this game, because you ran for 4,000 yards in one quarter. But we'll start off with you on this one, Alex. What are your thoughts on this Western Conference matchup in the big stadium? Granted, a lot of people there.
Yeah, shout out to all the fans that came to Volkspark Arena there, or stadium, I should say. And it didn't take long for them to sit down and be entertained, as Glenn Tunga took, I think, his first or second carry, 60-plus yards to the house. The first few minutes were all Glenn Tunga, 3 touchdowns in a row for him. And the Rhein Fire were off to the races. It looked like an amazing atmosphere, like a great day just for ELF football there. And I'm glad that the Hamburg Sea Devils kind of showed some life, scoring some points and making it entertaining for the folks that showed up there. 25,000 plus fans in the stadium who watched the Rhein Fire remind everyone that, they're the Rhein Fire.
Yeah. And obviously it was an unfortunate situation with Jarvis McClam getting injured in that unfortunate way. So the Hamburg Sea Devils were playing without their star A receiver. But Matt, what are your thoughts on this big 25,000 fan game?
It's a big one. I mean, Glenn had an average game. At this point, it just kind of is an average game for Glenn. This is his 4th game in a row with 3 or more touchdowns. So, at this point, it is just an average Glenn game. He's phenomenal. He's still my MVP. He is very, very close, I believe, only 2 away from the all-time single-season rushing touchdown record. He has 1,205 yards in the year. He's been incredible. He has 1 away from 50 career touchdowns, and second place in that category has 22, which was Madre London back in the first year. Glenn was outstanding again. So, it's just become regular programming that we talk about Glenn. It's just Glenn live. How did Glenn do in the last couple of weeks? He's been incredible. But then we talked about the passing offense last week, about how was it going to become unlocked? Is this again we're going to see it? I think we just saw it. JJ went 12 for 14 for 194 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Like he was lighting them up. McKnight's back. He got 128. Haaland looked fresh again. This is another one where you got to watch some more of the tape because he got 2 touchdowns. Both of them were like stunning catches, laser beams of throws by Clark. And then he also was massively underappreciated into blocking. He's an amazing blocking receiver, probably the best in the league. And he was opening a lot of runs for Glenn as well. So he deserves his flowers. The defense, for the most part, was good. And this was what we were talking about as well with Fulford. You've just brought in a new quarterback we said about how hard of a debut it was with him coming in with a team that isn't necessarily needing a quarterback change. It felt like a bit of a lateral move.
Right.
You have that. You're in front of 25,000 people, however many the official attendance was. I can't remember. And then you also have an A receiver get injured on his entrance. Like, this has got to be one of the worst situations for a debut in like football history, not even ELF history, just football history.
Yeah.
I feel like he played all right. Some of that decision making was flashed up with that pick to Marshall, that it just kind of was a throw into deep coverage. Amari Williams is one away to interception wise from being the all-time ELF interception reader, so that's pretty cool. It was just, Hamburg came in slow, dominated by Glenn on the run. Yes, Raji got his touchdown, as you can see there, and there's a lot of touchdown scorers. It looked like they took the foot off the gas, and they were able to kind of get some points at the end, but it was never really close. I'm glad that the fans got to see a few touchdowns from their team because they do have an amazing support base, but this was all round fire, all day, every day.
Yeah, 100%. And then just in the chat here, because we asked Glenn, give us your inside perspective. Glenn said, Coach A just knows how to draw it up, man. That's Coach Andrew Weidinger, who was the assistant coach of the year last year. Actually, previously the head coach of the Barcelona Dragons when they were a killer team a couple of years ago. And now the offensive coordinator for the Rhein Fire. He said the blocking up front is amazing too. Everyone was just having a good time. Then Marcus says, I love Glenn's humility. Celebrating, yes. Showboating, no. It really stood out to me after one of his huge TDs, how he calmly took a seat on the bench. And, Glenn, we don't want to hype you up too much here, okay, man? But, I agree with that. Glenn is a superstar, face of this league. Great guy. If we had a video game, Glenn would be on the cover of it this year. He'd be on ELF, EA Sports Football. He'd be on the cover of it, just consistently week in, week out. And the Rhein Fire, after that little hiccup against the Madrid Bravos a few weeks ago, they've been taking steps in the right direction. Jadrian, 50% of his completions were touchdown passes. He went 12 for 14 with 6 touchdown passes. That's a ridiculous stat. He ended up with a, I think, perfect passer rating, according to Maxi, our producer. This one ends pretty one-sided, 61-23. The Rhein Fire are rolling into the second half of the season. All right, everyone, that is our slate of games. We had some good ones this week, some very exciting ones. Maxi, can you pull up the standings so we can take a look at how our conferences are looking right here? And guys in the chats, I'll ask everyone in the chat the same thing. What stands out to you in the standings? No pun intended. Matt, start with you. What is jumping out to you in the standings after week 8?
I think my one's still got to be the Galaxy being so low. Centurions hop over them. But that's kind of like the West is kind of 2 conferences in itself. You got the 7, 5, and 1 teams, and then you got the 2 win and 4 loss teams. So it's kind of just the elite, and then the ones that have just kind of sifted through. It'd be interesting to see how they do in a different conference if we do get some alignment in the future. But that's definitely what's sticking out to me. It's just the division between the elite in the West and the not elite in the West.
Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I'm looking, like we touched on earlier, that Central Conference number 2 spot, Munich Ravens and Tyrol Raiders. Raiders beat them by 3 points last time, so Munich has to beat them by more than 3, which, is likely to happen if they win. So whenever that rematch is, I'll be tuning in for sure because that could be the playoff spot. And then also looking at Berlin, where do they go from here? 4-4. They are such a talented squad. They just took Paris to the wire. They've been really good against the Rhein Fire. Are they just a spoiler now? Where do they go in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, that's the thing, man. Berlin's so interesting. I mean, they've still got a lot of tough games, but they've proven that they can play very closely with elite teams. They could have won against Paris. They could have won against the Rhein Fire. They could have won against the Vienna Vikings. They've dropped all those games, but sitting at 4-4 right now, do they fall in the win column, find themselves in the win column on some of those games in the latter half of the season? I don't know. In the chat, Sven Breidenbach, the big offensive lineman for the Rhein Fire, says, don't hype up Glenn too much. Don't want him to start taking too much vet days off at practice. So we'll pull back a little bit, but both of you guys are vets. You deserve some days off. You know, the veterans, you know, give them those Tuesdays off like they do in the NFL. For me, I think same thing. Yeah, that Berlin jumps out to me, and then the 2 to 3 spots in the Central Conference. And our director, Maxie, says the Raiders at Munich is week 14. So that's actually going to be right before playoffs. It's going to be an incredible game. Might be the game of the year up until that point, because it's very likely going to have massive playoff implications. So we look forward to that. And that is what we got right now for playoff picture after week 8. An interesting thing for me is the Stuttgart Surge dropped, despite being undefeated, drop from the 2nd seed where they would theoretically get the bye. They dropped to 3 just based off how many wins they have. And the Rhein Fire find themselves back in the 2nd seed. How would you guys be happy with this playoff picture right here? Matt, start with you.
I think I would like to see that, because it's not going to be a last year's final, because that can kind of sometimes be good and bad, but they kind of blew them out in the last year. So I wouldn't necessarily want to see that. I think that we could even see like an all-West final, which I think would also be interesting, because it'd be like a best of 3 if Madrid versus Rhein, for example, would be a good matchup. Same with Paris, they nearly beat Rhein. So there's a lot of potential matchups coming on here. I'm talking like Rhein Fire guaranteed a spot in the final, which they are far from being guaranteed a spot in the final. Vienna have a bye and then have to play against another West team. Like, the West really does dominate this league to have such a presence in this playoff picture.
Alex, what are your thoughts?
I was just watching you react to an all-West final, Nick. That's what I was reacting to. No, this looks like some great football. You know, we just watched Surge and Raiders play, and then next week we get to watch Paris and Madrid. So, yeah, if these are our final 6 going into postseason, I'll be very happy.
Do you guys think, and chat, chime in if you have an opinion, do you think it's pretty set that we'll have 3 Western teams in the playoffs as we have here right now in the current playoff picture? Or do you think, is it possible that 2 Central teams sneak in there? I don't think we're going to have 2 from the East, or sorry, 3 Central teams. Could the Ravens and the Raiders sneak in there instead of a Madrid? Do you guys think that that's possible, or do you feel like we're going to have 3 from the West?
I think West is more likely, right? Because it's just a better conference, but it's also harder to win games in the West, so it'd be more reflective in the win column. But Cologne and Galaxy and Sea Devils are far and away not as good as the other 3 in the top of that conference, as I spoke about a little bit earlier. So I'm favoring the West because of that, because quality of team is a lot higher than anywhere else. Like, you have the Surge in the Central, and then the Raiders in Munich, but they're kind of like, that they wouldn't necessarily be thriving, I think, if you put them in the West. I think it'd be a very different story. So I'm still probably going to go for the West teams.
Yeah. Okay. There, Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, for a West team to drop, it probably would be Madrid, right? The first-year team we're looking at. And they've shown they can beat up on the other West teams. They beat Galaxy handily. They beat Cologne. So no reason to doubt them right now.
As I have doubted them earlier in the show. We'll see. I'm out on a limb there. We'll see. I'm risking my whole career as an ELF analyst here. I'm going to get fired after this. All right. So that's our playoff picture. Those are our standings. Now our final segment of the show. And chat, you guys got to chime in, because we're an uneven amount of hosts today, so we don't necessarily each have a full vote. We're going to decide who are the 2 nominees for MVP of the week. And we are going to rotate here through a bunch of different graphics. A lot of very good performances this week, both offensively and defensively. So we will start off, Matt, with you. Max, you throw up that first graphic, and Matt, tell us who, or read that out for us. Oh, yeah.
We're going to go Dijon Harris first and foremost. 8 tackles, that forced fumble that he forced and then for a touchdown. Outstanding. Probably the play of the game, like the Ghazi hero play of the game. That's probably this one. Like, it was an outstanding game. He got the interception at the end that really iced it up. Covered Markel Castle all game, which is really not an easy thing to do, and he looked spectacular. I'm definitely going to go for Harris to be probably the best defensive player of the week. Absolutely amazing game.
All right, nice. Alex, load us up on
Yeah,
the next
Harris,
one. Oh,
great
sorry.
game. Great game from Harris. Absolutely put the clamps on Markel Castle and got a huge win for Cologne. So shout out to Bijan Harrison. Only, I think, his second or third game in the ELF. So nice to see him coming in late in season and making a big impact.
Yeah, new guy. All right. Maxie, throw up the next one. On I can never pronounce this. Dreendal.
I think it's Durendal, yeah.
Durendal. There we go. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. And I'm happy that I drew this one. A linebacker with 18 tackles and an interception. We said off air before the show, those are AJ Wentland type numbers. So he had a great game, although they lost to Cologne. He had a standout individual performance. He was all over the field, grabbing up 18 tackles. He's got to be in the conversation this week. Maxie, next one. Alex, that's you.
All right. Yeah, my guy getting perfect passes from Ben Holmes, of course. 9 catches, 145 yards. Reese Horn continues to show that, the veterans matter. Another ELF veteran balling out in a new situation. A fantastic game from Reese Horn. Again, I think he's one of the top statistical leaders in the league receiving wise. So we'll see how him and Ben Holmes continue to develop their chemistry moving forward.
All right, there we go, Reese Horn. Throw up the next one for us, Matt.
Zach Edwards, outstanding performance, especially in that first half. 15 for 26, absolutely unstoppable in that run. 140 yards to 4 total touchdowns, and just the amount of key situations he was able to be clutch in, which is something that we've had our doubts about with Edwards and his clutch ability down the stretch. He looked like he might have shut some of that down. There was some fumbles on the offense late, but he really steadied the ship, especially with those third down conversions in the fourth, and he's definitely a strong contender for this week's MVP.
Absolutely. Maxie, next one. There we go. I like that. My boy, Mitch Fettig, absolutely standout game. Does not get enough credit in this league. One of the best defensive players. He had 13 tackles. He had a fantastic interception, 2 PBUs all over the field, as he is quite often. And this was a very, very strong defensive performance from an extremely criminally underrated Mitch Fettig. Next one, Maxie. Alex.
Jadrian Clark, perfect passer rating. I almost said this when we were going over the game. Those are the quietest 6 touchdowns I've ever seen from. I mean, that's crazy. I didn't even fathom that he threw 6 touchdowns until you said it, and I looked at the stats. Like I said, it was like easy mode for him out there. Only 2 incomplete passes, 6 touchdowns. The Rhein Fire are heating up.
Ridiculous numbers right there. All right, Maxie, next one. Matt, that's you.
Nissan Gumakini with a great game. I think I nailed that name. I'm happy with that one. 3 sacks on the day, 6 tackles, 5 of which tackles for loss. He was absolutely the highlight of this defensive unit. He did everything right. Like, he was penetrating that offensive line. Every time you looked, Nissan Gumakini was there. Like, he's everywhere. He was phenomenal. He's a great athlete. He's been with Vienna for a while. He's just had a few injuries here and there. So he's been kind of laying low with people in the limelight of seeing him, of how good he is, because he's uber athletic, great off the ball, like burst and snappiness. And we saw it, 3 sacks against a bad offensive line, but Nissan Gumakini definitely deserves to be mentioned.
You know who I think deserves to be mentioned is Matt Bressington for that perfect performance in pronouncing the name Misangumukini on the first try. So, actually, I hope you can get up the graphic before the end of the show. Matt Bressington nominated MVP of the week. Throw the next one up, Maxie. Zylai, fantastic defensive performance out there for the Enthroners in their big win. 8 tackles, 3 sacks. Love to see it. They really were just quite dominant on defense, and he led the way for them. So Zylai is in the conversation for MVP of the week. Next one, Maxie. Alex, that's you.
I'll go with my guy, Carlton Aiken Jr. I almost said getting the win. It felt like a win for them. I think he had almost 500 yards when you add up. He caught a pass. He threw for nearly 400 yards. He ran the ball well. He put on a freaking show out there in Vienna. So shout out to Carlton Aiken. Like I said, he's an inspiring player.
100%. Then who we got next, Maxie? Spiller. You know, you said, I think, Matt, you said it earlier. Noah Torre is getting all of this clout, but Spiller also deserves to be in the conversation. 7 catches for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against what has been all year the best defense, or one of the best defenses. Absolutely fantastic standout performances for the young fella. And who do we got next? There we go.
Jack Mangle. He was amazing. And he got them the team's first win, which goes a long way. He's been underrated. Yeah, exact. W's only for Jack Mangle. But he went 22 for 32 passing. Real big game. And he got hurt in this game and still managed to put up a great performance. Because if you remember, he got strip sacked. Elbow looked like he went the right way. Kind of shook it off. Came back out and led the team to another few touchdowns. So he did great. Got Robitaille involved. Can't complain. Pretty much an all-round perfect game for him, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex?
Glenn Tonga, another great game. 231 yards on 19 carries is crazy. Like Matt said, he's almost at 50 touchdowns. I believe he's the all-time leading scorer in the ELF as far as touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, like we said, we're giving him his flowers every week. He's amazing.
And don't forget, this was Tunga's performance was in about a quarter and a half. The only knock I have on Glenn's performance is that it's average. It's actually an average performance for him. So I don't know if it's, that's he's shooting himself in the foot by doing that every week. All right, guys, we got to choose 2. Chat, chime on in as well. Are you guys feeling incredibly strong about any of these that you think, hey, this has got to be our guy? Matt, who you leaning to right now?
I think probably Glenn. Like although we acknowledge it as it's just a normal day for him, like he deserves the MVPs for getting this, just not just as consistently as he's doing it, but it's another 3 touchdowns, and he got like 3 carries and 2 touchdowns for like 100 yards early in the game. For me, he would be the MVP that I feel most passionate about, because he's just been so electric, and in this game especially, but all season.
Okay, nice. Yeah, can't really argue with that. Alex, anybody that you're feeling incredibly passionate about?
Sometimes life, it's not about the result. It's about the process. Even though they didn't get the win, Carlton Aiken, man, he balled out this week. He is my MVP for the week. They didn't get the W, but trust the process and trust Carlton Aiken.
I like that, man. Who trusted the process was the Enthroners, and that's why Jack Mangle has had a great week this week as well. He's not my pick. I mean, I lean towards it. I gotta lean defensively, and for me, I think Bijan Harris, although the stats aren't crazy, I mean, I think he had 8 tackles, 1 forced fumble with the scoop and score he did on the same play. That was a huge momentum. That was very valuable. We're talking about most valuable player. And then he had a interception in the end zone on what could have been a touchdown for Markel Castle. He guarded Markel Castle damn near the whole game. And we've said it, Castle is the best or one of the best wide receivers in this league. We do have Carlton Aiken in the chat giving the salute, so he's happy about Alex's pick. Ake VP as his campaign slogan is now. All right, guys, we got to decide on 2 of these. So we got Glenn, we got Carlton, and we've got Bijan Harris. Feeling a little bit of peer pressure here as 2 of our candidates are in the chat. Okay, we cannot let these great athletes sway our decision. This is tough.
Yeah, I also think that Aiken's MVP slogan, as you said, should just be a better man. I think it should just make you be a better man. Should just be his MVP slogan. I really don't know who I would put as my top 2.
Hear me out. Do you guys think am I way too defensively skewed and biased that I'm nominating Bijan here? Do you guys think it's legitimate?
Yeah, I think I have 1 of each, right? 1 offensive, 1 defensive.
Okay, I like that. Alex, are you cool with that?
Yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we got Carlton and we got Glenn in the chat. It's going to be one of you guys. anyone else in the chat, feel free to chime in, or Carlton and Glenn, if you would like to hand it over to the other.
Do a coin flip. Do a coin flip.
Be a bigger man. Glenn, he's got the eyes emoji. Boys, this is tough. And our producer Maxie is chiming in as well. He said we didn't pick Jadrian with his 6 touchdowns. It's a tough week. It's a tough week, Maxie. It could have been any of them. I don't know, guys. Do it for England, boys.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. Here's going to be my thing. We lost yesterday. We need a win. Let's give it to Glenn.
I do think we got to give major props to Carlton Aiken, especially for just like the consistency and being the heart and soul of that team. Carlton, we love you, man. I feel like I got to lean towards Glenn because that's just a ridiculous performance.
Let me get one, bro.
Because Glenn has been so active in the chat because of the game last night, I'll come over to the Glenn side.
Oh, man. See, we got Carlton's in there. He said, Glenn, let me get one, bro. I feel bad. I feel so bad. I don't know if on Instagram they can give 3 as the nominees. If we have to do 2, then I guess we're going Bijan and Glenn, 1 offense, 1 defense. If they are able to do 3, I don't know if they can do that on Instagram. Do 3, Maxie, and let the people speak. Maybe Carlton is the people's champ. But so that's our situation. I think. All right, Carlton, I'm going to try. We're going to see if we can get 3 for the voting. I don't know if it's possible, but that's what we got. You guys think that's fair, boys?
Yeah,
I like that.
All right. That's tough. We have a hard job being these CLF analysts. We've got a tough job, tough gig, but I think we found a good solution. All right, guys, that is going to be our show. Thank you so much to everyone in the chat. Matt, Alex, I have an absolute blast doing this with you fellas. Love doing it.
Appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
Hell yeah, guys. All right. So we'll see you all on Thursday, and then we'll have another week of ELF football and talk some more. Thank you, everyone. Let's keep it rolling. See you next time.
See you, man.
See ya.